Thanks for being here, guys. We're going to start off by introducing our esteemed and amazing panel. First off, we have Mark Haberstroh. His passions are to share what has helped him in his life, hold space for deep emotional processing, spiritual development, nature reconnection, and growth. He is on a mission to promote access to ancient tools and spread awareness wherever he goes. Mark is a minister for the Congregation of Sacred Practices, and he has worked as a psychedelic facilitator at 6 different retreat centers. Can we have a little love for Mark, please? We have Vanessa Cruz, who is a licensed practical nurse, an end-of-life doula, and psychedelic guide with a passion for healing and ancestral wisdom. Some love for Vanessa. Rayne Grant is a passionate mycologist and environmental advocate. Rayne has been dedicated to the study of fungi since 2012 and is the founder of the Four Corners Mycological Society. As a filmmaker, she is very close to completing the highly anticipated documentary, Can Mushrooms Save the Planet? And as a visionary, she is the president of the nonprofit organization, the Psychedelic Club of Durango and Theogenic Leading Edge. Give it up for Rayne, please. Marissa DeBaca has deep roots in the bioregion, as well as a storehouse of extensive knowledge, which helps to guide folks towards a more nuanced understanding of the healing properties of plants and fungi. She is a psychotherapist with a background in clinical social work, and she is the president of the New Mexico Psychedelic Science Society. Joaquin Orozco, MS, is a mestizo huichol from Mexico who grew up participating in ceremonies. With a demonstrated commitment to improving the cannabis and psychedelic ecosystems within New Mexico for the past 8 years, Joaquin promotes community approaches to drug policy reforms. He supports re-indigenized notions of healing with sacred relationships to plant medicines, cultural humility, relationality, restorative justice, radical reimagining, and cultural reclamation. He is a board member for DCRIM Psychedelics New Mexico. And last but certainly not least, we have Gina Devani, a board-certified holistic counselor and a psychedelic facilitator based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Her practice is rooted in deep listening and pulls in tools from art as therapeutic modality, interpersonal communication, nonviolent communication, yoga asana, breathwork, philosophy, hakomi, shamanic healing, energy healing, consciousness medicine, holistic health, there's more, somatic therapy, sound healing, dance movement ceremony, expanded states, meditation, and mindfulness. Thank you all for being here. So first question for our panel is, how have you witnessed the psychedelic landscape shift since you first stepped into it yourself?
So when I first started talking about this like 11 years ago, or just bringing these subjects to the forefront, people like referred to me as the crazy mushroom lady. And I'm like, oh, well, I mean, it's not all about psychedelics. I mean, like this weekend, we're talking about soy regeneration and things like that. You know, mushrooms are amazing, right? And I would say, like, in the last 2 years, people haven't been referring to me as crazy, which is nice, you know. I mean, we're all a little bit crazy, but I will say that there has been a shift in awareness. We just have to keep talking about these topics to make them less taboo, and that's what I see is that people are talking about it more, and it's becoming more accepted. Yeah.
Just the mushroom lady now.
Now, yeah, it says mushroom lady right there.
I'll chime in. I am newer to psychedelics than a few of the people up here, and really focused more on breath work and movement and meditation for many years, and as expanded states work, and then eventually moved into psychedelics just for my own growth. And so just in the last handful of years, I've seen tremendous change. I mean, when I first started moving into this work to become a practitioner, even before that, when I was just, looking for a guide myself, it's like nobody knew anybody. And, I just happened to luck out and find out about a guide that I could work with. And today, they're everywhere and everybody's talking about it, and there's, I mean, it's we're rich in abundance with all kinds of information, useful or not. And so what's great though, I think, is that it's so much more accessible to people. And I just sat for an 81-year-old psychotherapist, and I have another 80 plus client who I'm talking with. And, when did that happen before? I don't think it did necessarily. And so all this growing comfort in psychedelics being useful is what the word that I keep hearing, useful. I think that might be useful for me. Is great because it makes it more possible for people of all ages, who are in the realm of potentially doing psychedelics, to do something different and get out of the norm of the psychological medicines, if that's what's right for them. So more options is what I see.
I think it has the potential to make a cultural shift. I think we're seeing glimpses of it. Maybe we're on the beginning of the cusp of it, but I don't know. I haven't seen any. I mean, major societal. What do you guys think about that? Am I crazy?
I think I forgot the question.
The question is, how have you witnessed the psychedelic landscape shift since you first stepped into it?
The shift. That that's a big question. A lot of things have changed. But this is medicine that has been held by wisdom keepers for centuries, right? And so this isn't something that's new. It's just different in the way that it's being approached now. And so traditionally you went to medicine people to have this type of healing. And now the landscape is changing in that those people are being forgotten in that space. And now it's becoming something completely different. And so that's how I have most seen that change. And how do we, the word reciprocity is thrown around a lot, but it's not just reciprocity. It's like, how do we involve these people in this movement? How do we keep that traditional wisdom alive? How do we invite them into this space versus kind of taking it over, or what's the word? Yeah, just what does that really look like? How do we still keep the traditions alive?
Yeah, I think that thinking about it, wherever there seems to be a bright light, especially when it is pertaining to healing, especially spirituality, I think New Mexico in itself is a good example of this. Where there's light, there is also the darkness of which it comes from as well. And so in the landscape now, I mean, this isn't new, called the Renaissance, right? But it's being born again. And so in this time, in day and age, I think the shadow side is definitely, absolutely what Vanessa's saying, and this has happened again. So how are we going to approach that differently? And then the light side of it, I think, is the reason why it's even blowing up in the first place, right? We have pain management, right, in ways that we never thought psychedelics could actually reach. Our returning soldiers, such as Joaquin, have seen help that they have not been able to get before. Depression, substance abuse disorders, things that have been plaguing us for a while, we are seeing a hope there. So I think there is a dualistic principle that definitely needs to be looked at, and we have to move at the speed of trust, and we have to honor where we are right now with this, and we really have to make sure that we are being respectful and how we're approaching it this time, because we have been here before and it was taken from us, and it was used really against us. So I think that's how it's changed. It's come back. It's changed in the day and age that we're in right now, and where we are as a species, where our consciousness as a species right now. And I'm sure nobody can argue that we have moved into a new place, or at least the precipice of a paradigm shift. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what everyone else has said. For me, the word that keeps coming to mind is that it's gone mainstream, and that I started healing myself 8 years ago and nobody wanted to hear about it. And they thought I was crazy or that I was a junkie or something. And I, did that for a couple of years and then sought out more community and tried to find a retreat center. And at that point in time, about 6 or 7 years ago, there was only one public psilocybin retreat center that I could Google. And now there's so many. And now there's so many, sorry.
Marissa, I love what you said about moving the speed of trust. I think that's really beautiful. And jumping on what you were saying, Vanessa, I'm curious to know, what are some of the pitfalls that you're noticing or are concerned about as the mainstream embraces plant medicine more and more?
I would say perhaps some of the sacredness around it, but also I don't know. In some ways, we have the potential to replicate what happened, in the late 1960s. Sexual abuse is a concern. I don't mean to be down. I tend to critique things because I want to improve things. But there's a lot of fake shaman that's occurring, and so that's I think it detracts from what we're trying to do. Those types of things. Especially these first ones really got to be ethical. I don't know, just responsible guides, because it's just so visible. It seems like. Yeah.
Just to bounce off of that, what makes a responsible guide?
That's what we're trying to define.
I mean, in my opinion, a responsible guide, if you're getting, being guided in a psychedelic experience, would be someone that can hold a safe space for you and create a space where you personally feel comfortable, because each person is going to have a different need, different agenda, a different vision of what they're trying to achieve. And some people don't know. But, we have all sorts of, like you were saying, fake shamans. We have guides and even therapists, psychedelic and not, that will take advantage of people. But it's easy to take advantage of someone if they're under. So I think it's really, really important to know the people that you're working with, whether it's a shaman or a therapist or even a friend who's a trip sitter, is to trust the situation. So I think it's highly important.
it takes a lot of time to build a relationship with someone before you can even, have the trust to know that they're going to support you in medicine. So, there's people that offer group experiences, or they have one or two introductions and then they're guiding, or even sometimes at a retreat, you have a short period of time that you're there. And so how do you, always asking questions. How does your guide, hold space? What are the things that they do? What is their preparation process? Their preparation process with you. What does that look like? Do you have the ability to ask questions? Do you have the ability to say, this doesn't feel right? Do you have somebody else you can refer me to? Do you know people in the community? Recognizing when maybe it's not a no, but it's maybe a not right now. And there needs to be additional work that needs to be done before you actually can move into medicine space. So all of these are ethical areas where, an ethical guide's going to take the time that's needed. It's not something that's like, oh, I'm a shaman and I'm come and see me and medicine work is done and then harm takes place because they weren't prepared. Either the client wasn't prepared or the guide wasn't prepared for what showed up. So there definitely has to be trauma-informed education there, because so many things come up in medicine.
Yeah, I would add to that just a lot of self-work. It takes, and hopefully they're holding themselves to a level of integrity. It's one of the most important aspects of a guide. And then nowadays that things are becoming more open and not so much underground, hopefully they have some sort of a community or a teacher that they can also offer their clients to turn to if something feels weird.
And Marissa, I'm especially curious about your perspective on some concerns you have about the current trajectory of psychedelic evolution, some of the pitfalls that we'd be wise to be aware of.
Late stage capitalism? No, I don't mean to be a nihilist. I think it actually, we could learn a lot through the mycelium on how to create a better, well-serving government and institutions that are breaking down, such as our school systems. I mean, this is already happening on its own. And there's quite a bit of history that is finally being released that is pretty evident that actually our current Western civilization has a lot to do with probably these entheogens. And so if we can go back to humility, ethical rapport, like we're talking about, in, of course, our relationships with our clients within, the healing centers, but then also, how we are restructuring our current civilization that is definitely taking a turn, And so I think that, I think some pitfalls that we need to work on humility, right? I think, the crux of especially I would say the United States is like we have come so far along. Look at how we're doing. We are a first world country, which is true in some ways, and we have some really incredible advancements, obviously, and I love that about us. But we also need to learn, again, humility, right? And so that some things that were like great achievements, right? Like, like we created this great pesticide chemical Roundup, and then like 30 years later, it's like, did you spray Roundup? You could be compensated in a lawsuit. So just kind of taking a second look at things and seeing where we can improve, especially within the work of psychedelics and preservation as well, and restorative justice too.
I'm curious for some of these, pitfalls or concerns that we have. Where do you guys see the solutions? And what pivots are you excited to see people making in the psychedelic culture?
This, I'm finding more and more, is such an important field, or a field where it's important to have people coming in from so many different perspectives, because because really like one person's thoughts and opinions on anything. So it's so great to have this really eclectic panel. One person's thoughts and opinions are just this one sort of molecule in this greater being that we all are, and it's vital to hear many voices and many perspectives, and because each human is so unique. It's one of the things that's been so remarkable to me about actually doing the work is what someone presents with what they're working on healing, both in the material that they're healing and also the way that their minds are holding it. Everyone is so unique. And so we've got to bring that uniqueness in from all corners to provide education and support and just on an ongoing basis, because as this is evolving, we are evolving too. And so it's going to keep changing as we keep growing, and we're gonna make mistakes. And the whole thing, it's like this so within, so without thing, right? If we can learn as humans to repair ruptures, it's revolutionary. It's the lack of repair for anything that starts to go sideways, where we get disconnected from each other. And so I think that's a really important part, and having opportunities for those who want to participate to get involved in some kind of council work to bring all these voices together and create spaces where all these different voices can be heard.
Just real quick after that, and I was speaking on a macro scale, and just I have such great conversations with all of you out there. But I wanted to say too that, on a meso scale, like I'm a longtime New Mexican, right? My family's been here for generations, which is a beautiful thing. And I'm honored to say that. I also know that, again, going back to that darkness, I'm Norteña. We have seen a lot of suffrage here in this state. And I know this is in many states, but I'm just speaking as a New Mexican. When it comes to substance abuse disorders, behavioral health. And I see a pitfall here, as I've seen as a Santa Fean who, we were the families that were in the center that were pushed out, right? So newcomers come in, and we're already seeing, like, and no offense to 10,000 Waves or anything like that, but where we see that these medicinal values, the therapeutic values of these entheogens could be applied, they oftentimes miss those people that need it the most. And as a New Mexican, my care is more so about making sure that there's accessibility rather than just decriminalizing it. Because if it's not going to benefit our people, then why even do it?
There was an article that came out a little over a year ago, I want to say, and it said the top 100 influential people in the psychedelic realm, and there was maybe 2 people of color, and there was maybe 1 woman. And so, going off of what Marissa said, we need to bring that down to the community level. We heal in community. And so we need to start at the community level to build the programs that support, behavioral health, substance abuse, because only we know what that looks like, what that feels like, and how to make that accessible.
Would you restate the question?
Yeah. I'm curious to know your take on solutions for any of the pitfalls or concerns that you're seeing unfold in the psychedelic realm.
So I think it's about education. We have the power to educate ourselves. There's tons of information out there, loads of books. I probably own close to 50 books on different psychedelics, from naturally based ones to chemically based ones, because it's not just the entheogenic ones that are plants. They're now utilizing things like MDMA and whatnot. And I think it's about education, and we can educate ourselves. And I formed the Psychedelic Club of Durango back in late 2018, because we need to be talking about these things, and we need to challenge each other, because this is how we grow as a community, and this is how we learn. And it's an ongoing process. We can learn from our ancestors, we can learn from our educators and our and our researchers, and we can become researchers ourselves, and we can talk to one another. So it's about sharing our experiences, and we can share differences of opinion in order to build new concepts and grow. So that's what I think.
Anyone else have any solutions to offer up? Gentlemen?
You got it covered.
Any concerns about decriminalization or legalization? Anything that we should be mindful of as that conversation continues to unfold?
You want me to do it? Let's see Mr. Deacon.
You want to start?
Okay, I'm just gonna throw something in, and then I would love for my friend brother Joaquin to jump in too, because his organizations with Decrim. I think something that's really important to pay attention to, something I learned. It's been an incredible learning curve with the complexities of this work and just the information that comes along with it. So working on legislation, something that was really interesting for me to learn about and continue to really educate myself on is that with state legislation, state measures like this, decriminalization does not impact at all our sovereign nations. And so when we were trying to push legislation, that was something that we really had to think about, because in a way that's really great, because that is why they're sovereign nations. But this is where the complexities with the bullshit treaties come in, is because they are sovereign up into the point of federal legislation. And so anything that we were doing, right, it was to benefit whom? If we were talking about real reciprocity, then if we pass anything on a state measure, that would not impact our sovereign nations. And so I think that these are things that we definitely need to think about when it comes to decriminalization. I know when it came to peyote, this was true for, obviously, most of you know, California, where we had Huichol communities and elders come up and say, you need to take that off of your ballot. You can do what you want to do, but we did not grant this authority, and that's that respect, right? And so I think when it comes to decriminalization, of course, we got to think about expungements. We got to think about these people who are still locked up right now when we have all these dispensaries, and those that were just cannabis crimes on themselves are still serving time. Like, that is bullshit. So there are things that I think when it comes to passing legislation where it's like, yeah, this is really great, this is pie in the sky, but we have to make sure that we're looking at every detail so we're not hurting places that we're not intending to hurt. Thank you.
So I think Marissa's bringing this up. We're in an indigenous state. This is indigenous land. 14% of New Mexico is indigenous, native, tribal. Almost 50% are Hispanic. So this is this is New Mexico, and so these issues are important. But it doesn't seem to be represented in a lot of the psychedelic community that happens, unfortunately, here in the Southwest. So when I go to see an elder, a lot of times I've learned that we just need patience. Marissa was talking about humility, cultural humility, and we define that as assuming a humble posture. Realizing that you're a student, and so it's just that paying that respect as people go to seek this knowledge in these communities. It's got to be a different cultural approach. The past really isn't working. There's a lot of people that come through New Mexico. I've seen in academia, and I'm a nutritionist. I work in the hospitals. And there's a lot of people that maybe spend some time, and a lot of people get their credentials or build their experience and then move on. So we've got this in the medical care system. We've got this revolving door, especially in IHS, Indian Health Services. And so these are the issues that are important as we start to talk about psychedelics and including native locals. But we would love to hear you guys. I was the founder of Decrim Nature Albuquerque, and so for almost 3 years, we had got into thousands of conversations like this. It was largely in Albuquerque, so we've built and improved that. But yeah, it's I'm learning so much from folks. This is a really intelligent crowd, and I'm excited to be here.
I mean, so you said concerns about decriminalization. I mean, decriminalization is different than legalization. That's the number one. I mean, that's the first thing is learning the difference, and then also what's federally legal versus not, and there are fears surrounding this. It's like it's decriminalized, so it's safe, but if the feds came in, and that's the same with cannabis, if I'm not mistaken. So where do we draw the line in our fear factor, right? I think that if we're being responsible, whether we're using it for recreational use or in ceremony settings or in a therapeutic setting, it's good to just be mindful, and I think just not be stupid about it, right? Like go on the street and be, belligerent, let's just say. So I would say one of the concerns is that people have talked to me about is whether or not like kids are going to have more access to it and things of like that nature. But really, the more educated we are as individuals, whether we're adults, young adults, etc., I think we can make better choices. But yeah, I've had those concerns expressed to me.
Just real quick, one one thing that shows up is there's a lot of hype that like, oh, these medicines can combat all these different diagnoses, or there's a lot of positive going around about medicines, but there's also always that shadow side, and not everybody is suited for medicine work. So sometimes it isn't a wonderful experience. Sometimes it creates a hard time, a hard spot for individuals that, if they don't have community to talk about this with, can linger, and they can have some extended discomfort or mental health issues from that. So it's not always all rainbows and unicorns. There is always that shadow side.
So when I started this work about 5 years ago, doing decriminalization in New Mexico, I think a lot of us looked at it. We tapped into the cannabis community. We thought that they would be the most receptive to psychedelic changes, and that it's been somewhat productive to do that. But there really are differences between those groups, and we haven't had a lot of support in the cannabis community, unfortunately. Dispensary owners, I think people have kind of carved out their spaces, but we're hopeful that I think this is an issue that's very popular with the younger generation. It's a no-brainer. We just don't know how that's going to look like. It's coming to New Mexico in the next 2-3 years, but what's going to be the model of administration? How do we upscale? But I'm excited. Psychedelics are nefarious. We don't know how it's going to play out.
Mm-hmm. So just kind of bouncing off what you were talking about and in agreement, it's like something that's come up is harm reduction in our group. People taking things and excited about it, but not knowing how to take it, how much, overdosing, and people with mental health issues maybe shouldn't be taking some of these things. So there are concerns surrounding that. And again, that comes with education and, and just bringing these topics to the forefront. But harm reduction's a whole thing. I mean, we kind of dealt with that here at this festival when I first arrived, and I'm not trained in harm reduction, but they're like, Rayne, help. And I'm like, okay, I've got a little bit, of sensibility here. But having harm reduction people available, not just in festival scenes, but like in general, where can we go to feel safe if someone is ODing or something? And just to put it out there is a protection around you. If someone has overdosed, if you bring them to the hospital, you are not going to be charged, and neither are they. So just to let you know, if someone's in peril, call the medics.
I work for a psychedelic peer support line called Fireside Project. So if you are in a tough situation and you need somebody to talk to, you can call our line. We're open from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific time. You can talk to a peer supporter that's had a similar experience. Everybody has had experiences with medicine, and that's why they want to volunteer for the line. And you can also call the line and talk to someone to help you integrate an experience that may have been difficult. So harm reduction is huge. And yeah, you know, it's growing in festival spaces and things like that, but even in just like community here, we've had to do that. And that's us. We're peers, right? We support our community.
I just wanted to go backward a couple of steps because Joaquin, you mentioned about going to your elders. And it's wonderful that you have elders to go to. And not all of us do. Right? So a lot of the people coming up today into this work don't have access to true elders in this arena, indigenous or otherwise. And so that's one of the other things that's like a huge gap is we're not hearing from the elders because they're still like quiet in the shadows. And for many of them, I think it doesn't feel safe to be out. And that's another huge, enormous problem is that they don't have the sense of safety to be as out as somebody else. And there's something really broken in that. And it's a real detriment to all of the people moving into this work that those voices are not available more. And so, yeah, when you said that, it really just stuck with me. And I wanted to just bring that forward because that's a huge gap.
That's a really good point because I've heard multiple people on the panel talking about the importance of humility and how back in the day, like people in the psychedelic conversation were underground, were outlaws. It was something that we all kept private. So given now it's like widespread proliferation, how do we bridge that gap with humility, but also fold the elders and the natives into the conversation now?
I think right now, I think Fireside is such a great example because from what I understand, it's all volunteers, right? And so what I envision, and not just I envision, let's take the ego out of it. What I've heard and we've talked about many times, here at this festival, but outside is like re-envisioning what like a good dare program would look like from that crap that we had back then, where it was actually like real information, since like the kids can get it now and we know like teens are gonna. I was a teenager, like we went and got our mushrooms from the cow crap in the back, and so they're gonna do what they're gonna do. And now with fentanyl, I mean, it's like in everything now. And so I think having the harm reduction models and volunteers who want to do this work, you're showing up not just like have that like sexy title of, I'm a psychedelic assisted therapist, but also like I'm going out there and I'm devoting my time for those who are struggling out there because this is like the true work, right? And so see that. I also see we're going to be maybe working with Fireside. I hope to talk to you a little bit more about this, but with test kits, and so passing some legislation so that lawmakers cannot touch you at all for those volunteers who go to festivals. And they've been doing this in Europe, but like bring this here so that, because people are scared to go get their drugs tested because they think they're being watched by lawmakers, or not lawmakers, by the law. And so if you can go and get tested, and we can also like print out in the front of like where they're walking in what the Molly is or the ecstasy is, what actually is in it. And I think it's kind of like, so that's the humility of that, and then breaking down the war against drugs and how much of a failure that was by actually taking care of our people in the community by doing those type of, humility acts.
Nice.
Fireside Project is a great model for being able to support peers, like you said, and encouraging people to have their drugs tested. It's not always easy, but Dance Safe is a resource where you can order testing kits and supplies so you can test your own drugs. It should be readily available at every festival or space, or just at home you can order the kit and do that. And I was gonna talk about something else and I forgot what you said. But the harm reduction piece. We do also offer an affinity or identity based program with Fireside Project. So if you have an affinity, BIPOC, trans, veteran, you can call and process with someone of that identity if you ask for that. We also provide assistance for our volunteers to kind of have exposure to training programs or experience. So we ask people to volunteer for a year to do that, and they get experience from that. So a lot of people come out of psychedelic therapy training and they come to Fireside. So it's it's a model that it's free. You can speak to someone that you identify with, and it's a way that we can learn how we can do harm reduction even at a community level of just peers, right? We have that lived experience. So I didn't mention it, but our website's firesideproject.org and the number is 62-FIRESIDE. And there's also an app. And if you download the app, there's 2 buttons, call or text. So if you're tripping and it's kind of hard to see your phone, you just hit that button.
Yeah.
How many other states have something like this? It's a national. So so you can call nationally. Again, we're only within the hours of Pacific time. We hope to expand to 24/7. It is a nonprofit, so nonprofits are money ebbs and flows, and finding ways to become sustainable. But I think it's a great model for what communities can do, because you can do this at a community level. You can create, and I think that's part of states, and I've said this before, with Colorado, we went and decriminalized a whole bunch of pretty serious medicines, Ibogaine, DMT, but we didn't have any kind of harm reduction education that went out to the community before these medicines were decriminalized. And then we have, pseudo shamans or people that think they know what they're doing because they've had a few experiences or they went down to Peru for 2 months, and then people are getting harmed. And so can we provide, I encourage states that are looking to decriminalize to include in part of your legislation that there has to be a harm reduction education included with that, so that, we're covering all the bases.
All right, before I ask the last question, I just want to check in and see if anyone on the panel has any other solutions to offer for bridging the gap between the elders, the kind of OG, and where the psychedelic culture is now.
Protection. Like, I can't tell you how many, I won't say obviously names out of respect, but they just want to know that they're going to be protected. They can't be out there. I think it's kind of asinine to me that it's the pseudo shamans, it's those are the ones you can look up on the internet and go pay your $5,000 to have your retreat. But the elders that have been practicing forever, they have to worry about their family, going to jail. So I think that protection is really important and needs to be included in policy as well. There's a question right here. I don't know if we have to. No,
I didn't know if it's ready for questions, but I didn't mean to finish. I'm just
jump on in.
I didn't realize I was still raising my hand. I just have a question. Well, I have a question for Joaquin specifically, but if everyone could chime in, I'm super interested. Speak louder. Sorry? Oh, speak louder. Yeah. So in terms of protection, right? Now that they're going to start offering, also within the subject of criminalization and the thing we need to watch out for. Now that they're starting to offer, therapeutic doses of mushrooms, and I forget where I saw this, but that concern for big pharma taking over the psychedelic realm. I think I saw it was for 0.5 grams, so for 500 milligrams. So for anyone that doesn't know, that's a pretty small dose. It's about $500 to actually go in and get. That's the therapeutic dose price, starting price, and then after a gram, it was going into thousands. So are you guys working on figuring out how to protect these people that have actually been, these healers that have been practicing with people and already, have their established, holistic clinics, or, I mean, I don't know, like, I'm sure that there are psychedelic certifications out there, but like most people, let's face it, they're not certified. It's all through experience and it's all through them healing themselves. And most healers, their whole life is healing themselves. It's a big part of that. Is there anything that you guys are working on to kind of protect that? Because once the decriminalization starts, it's just going to be like, the same thing that happened with cannabis. Like tobacco companies now own dispensaries. And so like they have industry in any way, shape, or form, and this is kind of like the new wave of what's gonna happen, which is my biggest concern. If someone uses these medicines that's trying to help others.
So, I had a thought. Okay. So, in its current form, House Bill 393, I think when we almost legalized psilocybin a year ago, it would have been cost prohibitive for most New Mexicans to buy that. Because when you talk about maybe doing, 10 series treatment, it could easily be $150,000. Who can afford that? So it's definitely cost prohibitive. So we're looking about the possibility of having Medicaid pay for it. Why not? Why not have, and once Medicaid approves that, then private insurance will pay for that so that this medicine really gets to the people that need it.
I feel like
I was just going to add that, like in Colorado, I do believe certain establishments do cover Medicaid. So we are moving in that direction, which is a big deal.
this is a delicate topic in some ways because spoken like that, it sounds crazy, but they're not paying for the mushrooms, they're paying for the care. I think the way to combat it is cultivation, teaching more people how to grow their own, and then teaching people what qualities are in a good sitter. And this is something that people could start doing with their friends right now, setting up a good space. Like, you don't need my services as a guide, but some people choose that, and yeah, we also have to take care of ourselves.
I mean, I've been to ceremonies where it's like $500, and usually I just trip by myself with a face mask on in my room. But I decided to go to one of these, and it was like 70 people in one room. And then a lot of people like didn't even know how to dose themselves, and it was like, well, what intuitively speaks to you? And it's just like, come on, like there was no like intake of what SSRIs or because that messes with your tolerance and your experience and things like that. But it is such a delicate subject because like when there are 70 people in a room, even if you have 20 guys, like that doesn't work for everybody. Like for me, I could just feel everyone's energies, and it was too stimulating. There was nowhere for me to go because I wasn't allowed to leave.
This is a prime example.
So I was miserable, like just there for 8 hours because it was also like we started off with MDMA and then shrooms, and it was really intense.
This is a prime example of the shadow, the dark side of the space as it comes online, and there's so much hype around it, and why it's important to really get to know where you're about to go. And is it something like, what do they do? What's offering? How many people are going to be there? What are everyone's intentions? Stuff to look out for.
Just a quick follow-up there. And this is why education is so important, because people need to be educated so they can make good choices. I mean, that's really the bottom line, right? We don't know what we don't know, and we're hearing things and we're like, oh, maybe that's a good, somebody talked about that. I guess I'll go there, and that is not a great way to make decisions. We just have to be able to be sovereign in our decision making and very discerning. I mean, in life anyway, right? But around this work, it's vital. It's vital because it can do so much harm. It can do so many great things, and it can do so much harm. Yeah.
And I think to answer your question about the price point of psilocybin containing mushrooms themselves and cannabis, the thing about this is the anomaly of mushrooms, and this is Mother Nature, and God, I love her so much. She's not a cash crop. They've synthesized psilocin for sure, but it's nothing compared to the fruiting body, right? And so, like, yeah, and it's like what, $14 a pound, I think somebody's saying is average. No,
It should be.
it should be. Oh, that's what I'm sorry. So I think that, but that's so they're trying to like market it in that way. But I think like when you're saying like the protection of the elders, you know, like who have been doing this for a while and how are we doing that? So it's not just like pushed and shoved into the retreat model or the clinical therapy room model. I I think that those protections need to be in place for sure. I think being here in New Mexico is really interesting because of our Religious Freedom Act, right? And so how, like, what are we taking into consideration to make sure that the application of that protection is there, and even more so for that space? So I think it's a really great question, and I definitely think it brings up more of the questions like what are the pitfalls and what are we needing to pay attention to, and how are we going back to humility and checking ourselves and not getting too arrogant about it, for sure.
And just one thing to add, you know, Native elders especially, like, we take a step back, right? They observe, they watch, they will stay quiet, and they say, what does this look like? And you know, that's something that we can learn by, you know, taking it slow, taking that step back, watching, because right now it's all the hype, and then that's going to wane, it's going to come down, and then, you know, the people that are going to supposed to be here will be here, and then those elders will show up.
So last question for our panel, are psychedelics for everyone, and why or why not?
So psychedelics are not for everyone. I mean, every person's different, right? Not all of us need to take psychedelics. Some people really, really should not. But I honestly feel in general, especially with the mushroom medicines, that it's probably good for the majority of people, especially in small doses. I'm an advocate for macrodose, and I'm also an advocate for microdose. And there are all reasons and ranges in between. And if you come to my talk tomorrow, I'm going to talk about that middle dose there, that aphrodisiac dose. But yeah, I mean, some people shouldn't because it can cause damage. I mean, people with mental disorders, it can enhance that. But on the other side of that, there are studies showing that some people who have personality disorders and dissociative disorders and whatnot are being healed. So there are gray areas in there. So it's just about being mindful and educated. It comes back to being educated.
I will say that we've had people call the psychedelic peer support line with a multitude of diagnoses, and they're utilizing psychedelics. And so my biggest thing is choice. People have choice. You can make a choice. And whether you have a list of diagnoses or not, you have choice. And how do we as the community support individuals in that choice?
So New Mexico is a very poor state. It's really been devastated by the war on drugs, and I don't think that opening dispensaries and having legalized psilocybin therapy is going to be enough. There needs to be more of how do we manifest actually moving forward beyond the war on drugs, from being punitive to actually being health oriented. Those are the questions that me and Marissa are doing with DCRIM, with our DCRIM advocacy work. We would love to have more input in the work that we're doing if people are interested in pursuing that.
Woo! Yeah!
Sorry, I'm so talkative. Well, the other thing is, too, we need to have people that look like us that are providing therapy. So, there needs to be, it can't just be like one, people that are therapists or, people that can only afford the training because it's inaccessible. Even the training is inaccessible to people of color. But that's so important for healing in these spaces. If someone does want to hire a therapist or a psychedelic therapist or guide, the importance of having that lived experience or that affinity with that is so important in the healing. Because if I have a white therapist that I go into medicine with that has no idea what it feels like to be an indigenous person that was enslaved here in New Mexico all these years ago and detribalized and had, forced Christian names onto us, they don't understand that. So, yeah, that's another piece of that.
Last panelist is, are psychedelics for everyone? Why or why not?
I feel like I don't. Is it gatekeepery to say that it's not? You know, I think that when it comes to our consciousness, there should be nobody that has any say on that. But I do think going back to the education aspect, and again, like reforming some type of DARE program to say, yes, anyone can take this. If you have a history of psychosis, maybe it's not a good idea, and this is why. But they have the decision. So I don't think that it's for everyone. Just like meditation is for everyone. Just like if you want to channel, it's for everyone. But just, you know, check in with yourself. There's that sovereignty that comes in.
Yeah, I want to say that I feel like they're for anybody who's curious. And I was blessed enough to go to Mexico and eat mushrooms with a family down there, and they didn't do any sort of an intake. And like it was just held different. And perhaps with education, we can have certain guides specialize in working with people that we're told not to, such as bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder. I think that these things could help in the right setting with the right guide.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Mark. One of the things that comes up for me is when I say no to somebody. And, you know, because they came to me in the first place, I feel some kind of responsibility for what happens to them next. But ultimately, they're going to do what they're going to do, right? So I try to do as much educating as I can and explaining why I say no. You know, definitely have people say, then, you know, oh, well, I'm just going to go get some mushrooms and I'm going to do it myself. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen because we can't, you know, they ultimately do make their own decisions for themselves. And then it's also like this, you know, stuff happens, whether it's hard or good or whatever. And in the big picture, when you have had a bad experience or a difficult experience and you can look back on it years later, if you survive that, inevitably it was transformative. And so like part of me, like, you know, that devil's advocate part is like, and it always works out one way or another. I mean, you can definitely pile more trauma on top of trauma by doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. And if you make it through that experience a decade later, you might look back and say, it's a good thing I made that bad choice. So it's really hard to say. It's hard to say sometimes. And as facilitators and people involved in this work, we can do the best we can do, and people are going to do what they do at the end of the day. So like having Fireside Project is incredible. I have it on my website, and when I do meetups, I have it on my meetup page. I have it on everything because it needs to be proliferated out in the world as a resource. And we need more resources like that. So you're going to be inundated. You might already be. So yeah. So yeah, harm reduction.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for our amazing panel? Sir.
Definitely. I'd like to thank all of you. This was an amazing discussion. One thing, the harm reduction testing side, I fucking love that. It's like the most amazing thing. I have the dance safe kits up in the lab up there, so we can actually play with them, see how they work, look how they do all the things. They're really cheap to buy. So we can play with that tonight. One question I have, so I test mushrooms. I know there's a lot of different tryptamines that I can quantify, a lot more that I can't quantify. What's the difference in them to you? Do you guys find strain specificity being something super important to guiding people in this journey? That we know some produce MAOIs, some don't. So are these things something you guys have observed, or I'd just like to hear kind of each of your opinions on what strains do what's Is there better ones? What's better? What's better about it? Things like that.
Nice.
I'd say there's too many variables to say with certainty, and it's being used as a marketing scheme. The main difference is that some are more potent. Form a relationship with it and different strains and learn it, but for the most part, it's there's too many variables.
There are hundreds of psilocybe species, you know, that grow all over the planet, and that in itself is amazing, right? And my little bit of, I mean, just the other day, somebody gave me like 6 different varieties, and I was like, ooh, I get to play around with this. You know, they grow in different environments. They grow all over the planet. Who's growing them? Are they being grown in a lab? What intention is behind it? What substrate are they being grown on? There are all these different variables, right? And so I think it's very specific. But I mean, for me, like when I was playing around with different wands, I did find there to be nuances. I mean, there's going to be different levels of psilocin and psilocybin in one flush from one side of the flush to the other. So, you know, and I like to grind it to a powder, you know, just if you're trying to, you know, get specific on a dosage. But it is going to be different. So fill out that mushroom, you know, and there is something to be said, and this is just a personal opinion, for blessing your mushrooms. I like to bless my food. I bless my mushrooms. I would bless my crystals, and that's a little bit on the woo-woo side, but that's what I do. So, you know, that's my opinion. There we go.
I like truffles.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think what Mark said about building a relationship and echoing what you said, it's just like anything, right? If you have a relationship with something and you know what tool to use at what time, and maybe you've grown them yourself because, wonderful. And I personally am still working through building relationships with different strains, and it's going to take me a long time. And for now, I'm a really good friends with Golden Teachers, and they're reliable, good friends. And so that's kind of what I rely on until I do more relationship building. And just in time, I can see that expanding. Yeah.
So what you just mentioned is being used by the Oregon Psilocybin Therapy Program. That's the one strain that's allowed for people to possess and grow. It's got a long history of safe consumption, so that's a good one.
I know we could all talk about this for hours and hours, and I've been asked to wrap it up. So can we get a round of applause for our amazing panel? Thank you guys for your presence and engagement.